Wake up! It's the Sleep Unplugged podcast, episode 199. Sleep fixes with fine print. The only risk that you would take. Welcome, everyone, to the Sleep Unplugged podcast. My name is Chris Winter. I'm a neurologist, sleep specialist, and your host for this episode of the podcast. If you're new to the Sleep Unplugged podcast family, welcome. If you're a veteran, welcome back. We are glad you're here. If you want to get in touch with the show, talk to us about your ideas for future episodes, which of these sleep fixes with fine print you've tried. Let us know. You can get in touch with the show at Dr. Chris Winter Instagram, Dr. Chris Winter Twitter, Dr. Chris Winter Blue Sky Threads. We have a dedicated YouTube page where you can watch all the videos of the podcast. Just type in Sleep Unplugged on YouTube. We also have a podcast webpage, sleepunplugged.com, where you can see previous brackets of the pillow fight. You can find all of our top 10 sleep threats that we run down at the end of every month, the awards we've given out on the show, and all kinds of great information about the podcast. We have a sponsor this week, and it's really exciting because if there's one theme running through today's episode, it's this. Most sleep fixes work until the fine print shows up. And there's lots of fine print that come along with a lot of different sleep fixes, and we'll talk about some of those today. Melatonin, magnesium, mouth taping, none of them are bad ideas. They certainly have their clinical utility for some individuals, but they do need context, the right dose, the right person, the right timing, etc. And honestly, your pillow should be no different. And that's why I like what Pluto's doing. And I'm not alone. There are a lot of people who like what Pluto's doing because if you're looking on the YouTube, you see I'm holding the Sleep Unplugged Pillow Fight Tournament Cup. And you can see right there, Pluto is our 2026 winner. They reached out to me and said, hey, we'd love to sponsor the podcast. And I thought that would be great. And Pluto is doing something really special in the pillow industry. Instead of a sort of one size fits all sleep fix, Pluto treats your pillow like something that should actually fit you. I was talking to the CEO, Susanna, and she said, it's not a matter of there not being the right pillow out there for you. It's how we match that pillow to an individual. And that's really where Pluto's innovation shines. It's not just side sleeper, back sleeper. It's your body, it's your preference, it's your history with pillows. All of these things get pulled into this massive algorithm with all kinds of data points, literally millions of combinations if you start to work out the permutations and combinations of the pillow that could be right for you. It reminds me of going to Ollivander's wand shop, right? Have you ever been to Harry Potter World in Florida and you go to Ollivander's and they do the whole experience? You don't choose the wand chooses you. That's exactly what is going on with Pluto. So every Pluto pillow is built to order in LA by a dedicated pillow builder using a process that can create anything from a super thin 2.5-inch profile to something that's over 12 inches thick, from soft and marshmallowy to firm as a brick. And that firmness can be put to any loft. It's not just a product, it's a service, millions of data points, real human insight to get it right. And here's the part that really fits today's theme. They don't pretend to get it perfect on night one. You get 125 nights over 4 months to test it at home. And if it's not quite right, their team will adjust it, rebuild it, fine tune it. It's concierge pillow service directly to you. Because the truth is, great sleep isn't about finding the best pillow. It's about finding the right pillow. And I really love Susanna's story. She is this very interesting individual who really likes driving fast cars. You would never, this is not something, when I look at somebody, we all form an opinion. This is not what I would have expected she likes to do. And I noticed, I was kind of, looking at her her Instagram page, and there was a lot of cool cars on there. And I'm like, oh, she likes to take pictures of cool cars. No, 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 no. She likes to drive them. And she drove them so much and so aggressively, she was hurting her neck, and she had a lot of trouble finding the right pillow. Fast forward, she's on Shark Tank. She's developing Pluto Pillow, and she's winning the Side Sleeper Zeke Cup, and we're so excited. So that was our March Madness. Speaking of March Madness, I was out in Houston recently giving a shout out to the sleep vigilante Dr. Singh, who did the amazing intro music of this podcast. Saw him at a meeting, and he's got a little present for you. Of course, he lives in Indianapolis. He's like, look, you do the pillow fight, March Madness brackets, and I'm going to bring you a shirt from the real March Madness. Congratulations to Michigan. Shout out to Kathy Goldstein, who did one of our top 10 sleep threads. She's, of course, at the University of Michigan. And congratulations to them for winning. Well, before we get started, the lyric from our title this week, The Only Risk That You Would Take, is of course from one of my favorites, and I can't believe I haven't talked about him on the podcast. I had to look back because I'm sure I had talked about him, is Bob Seger. I think now that David Bowie is deceased, if you said, Chris, I'm going to arrange a dinner with you and one other musical person, who would you like to have dinner with and talk to? I think it'd be Bob Seger. He just seems like the most amazing, humble guy, hardworking. It's interesting. Most people don't know about Bob Seger until his later albums because he really worked really hard. He wasn't obsessed with fame, and it's just such an interesting story. So, this lyric was taken from the song "Still the Same," which was the first single, second song off of "Stranger in Town," not to be confused with "New Kid in Town," which was an Eagles song, which sounds a lot like "Beautiful Loser," which was the title track off of Bob Seger's eighth album of the same name, inspired by Leonard Cohen's novel Beautiful Losers. I love that. And really, Bob Seger found his voice through, I think, his good buddy Glenn Fry of the Eagles. When you listen to Beautiful Loser, that's sort of the first album people really became aware of, mainstream wise. It sounds a lot like the Eagles. It sounds a lot like Stranger in Town. So, uh, this was his 10th album, Beautiful Loser. I'm sorry, 10th album was still the same. Beautiful Loser came out in 75. Then it was Live Bullet 76. Live Bullet had Turn the Page, the live version that everybody hears on every classic rock radio station, which is an amazing song, an amazing saxophone. Then Night Moves came out in 76, Stranger in Town, 10th album, Against the Wind, 11th album, 1980, which has an amazing song. If you want to hear a great harmony, it's got a bunch of Eagles on it. It's called Fire Lake. And then Nine Tonight, which was my first Bob Seger album, and I was really upset that Turn the Page wasn't on there. Another really interesting note about this is that his first album came out and had the song Ramblin' Gamblin' Man, which is amazing. And if you listen to the drums on it that start the song, they are intense because his drummer Pep Paradin, Pep Perrin, wanted four bass drums because he was a big fan of Ginger Baker of Cream, who had famously two bass drums. He went on tour with four bass drums to get that kind of sound, which I thought was pretty awesome. His album Seven in 1974 was the first to feature the Silver Bullet Band, which I always associate with Bob Seger, even though he played with a bunch of different bands. But there was a bunch of turmoil with that because right after the Seven album, Beautiful Loser, he played a lot with backing group Muscle Shoals. Commonly called the Swampers. I'm a huge Shoals fan. I was actually in Nashville recently and saw a whole exhibit about Muscle Shoals. Played with Wilson Pickett, Etta James, Aretha Franklin, you name it. Not to be confused with Muscle Shoals Studio, which they started where Rolling Stones recorded like Gotta Move, Wild Horses, Brown Sugar. So anyway, we'll put some Bob Seger on the old Spotify music playlist, and here we go. So the modern sleep landscape that we're talking about is full of solutions that work. And I love the word work. You listen to the podcast, I talk about the word work a lot. Hey, Chris, how can I help you? Well, I tried something, it didn't work. how do you define work? What were you looking for? And there's some that don't, or there's some that work for a while and then they don't, which to me is very common. It worked, Chris, that thing worked for a while and then it didn't, which usually means I'm back to struggling to fall asleep or stay asleep throughout the night. In this episode, we're talking about the unintended consequences, the edge cases, the extreme cases, the hey, a little's not enough, says the TikTok person. You got to use triple, quadruple, massive amounts of that thing. And now we take something that's probably pretty benign, might be helpful, might not, and turn it into something that does contain risk. And so the problem isn't that the strategies are bad, they're often just kind of incomplete or they're being used incorrectly. So we're going to examine some hidden risks behind popular sleep supplements, clarify where dose, context, and patient selection matter most, identify who should use certain things and who shouldn't, and provide some practical guardrails. And I want to give a shout out to Susanna because Susanna said, look, I want to sponsor another episode of the podcast. I said, well, here we go. Here are some episodes that I want to do. Sign up. You can do whatever you want whenever you want. We don't have really a timeline here. Every now and then something becomes timely, like the orexin agonist we wanted to talk about. But other than that, you can do whatever you want. And she threw out some ideas, and she threw out the idea sleep fixes with fine print. That was her idea. Thought it was brilliant. So not only is Pluto making the right pillow for you, they're making my job as your sleep educator and guide much easier. So let's start off with magnesium. Hey, Chris, do you take magnesium? I do take magnesium, either the little sleep and restore gummies from Natrol that are melatonin free, or I've got the old mag glycinate, chewy little kind of like a starburst kind of thing. Each of them 100 milligrams, so two gummies, 100 milligrams, or one of these cherry flavored chews, which are delicious, 100 milligrams. I do it every night. Has it radically changed my sleep? No. Do I think that overall, if I were to look at the quality of my sleep now versus a couple of years ago, supplementing magnesium, is it a little bit better? I think it is. And I've gotten some anecdotal evidence from this researcher who sleeps beside me who says, yeah, I think you seem less restless. My restless leg is definitely better over the last year since I've been taking magnesium without question. In fact, I've been flying a lot lately. Just got back from Houston. Before that was in Spartanburg. Hello, Spartanburg, South Carolina. Checking in, and I'm not having that restlessness like I used to on flights, not having to use the old Bearby weighted blankets in the bedroom next door. So most supplements are somewhere in the 100 to 400 milligram elemental magnesium dose. The upper limit for a supplement is generally 350 milligrams, and we're not including diet. So, what are the toxicity risks? There are, as you start getting higher and higher levels of magnesium, you can risk renal impairment. Megadosing trends concern me. I've seen these on TikTok before, like the TikTok sleep stacks, whatever that means. So, how do you know if you're overdosing your magnesium? At really, really high doses, some symptoms include hypotension, like low blood pressure, slowed heart rate, lethargy, respiratory depression, vomiting, difficulty breathing, irregular heartbeats. Anytime you're messing around with cations, magnesium, potassium, sodium, you run the risk of affecting cardiac conductivity, the way nerves conduct electrical impulses, the way your gut works. There can be a lot of things that go along with that. So when you really get to the high levels and dangerous levels, cardiac arrest, and death have been cases. There have been cases of fatal hypermagnesemia. They exist. So the fine print is magnesium, perfectly safe. I think it's good to be supplementing the foods that we eat that often are supposed to contain a lot of magnesium. Don't, but based upon the way we farm, and there's hydroponic farming and turning soil over very quickly, the magnesium content just doesn't get into the foods like it used to generations ago. So magnesium's safe until your kidney function changes that equation. So be very careful with that. Always consult your doctors when you start using supplements, because if you're getting a lot of magnesium somewhere else in your diet or your medications, you want to be very careful about that. So we'll go on to number two, mouth taping, which we've talked about this before. I think that mouth taping for mild snoring is fine. I suspect that there will be data in the future that shows that mouth taping and the way it supports your jaw and prevents it from falling backwards probably helps with very, very mild cases of sleep apnea. But there are risks. And the big one is things sometimes have to come out of your mouth, not just go into them, like when you vomit. So, an individual who's trying to vomit but cannot get their mouth open or can get it all the way open to let the vomitus exit your mouth could cause a lot of problems in terms of that has to go somewhere. And your windpipe is a logical place where that could actually go. So, aspiration risks, especially people who already have pre-existing gastroesophageal reflux disease, people who use alcohol, which is a double whammy, more likely to vomit, less likely to wake up effectively, get the mouth tape off so you can so you can vomit properly, probably even more likely to roll onto your back where vomiting could be more of an aspiration risk. That mouth taping in some severe cases could be masking sleep apnea or worsening undiagnosed sleep apnea. I've seen patients who are not using typical mouth tapes. This is way back before mouth taping. I had patients who would use duct tape, and so you get this kind of peri-oral oral dermatitis and folliculitis. And I think for some people, having their mouth sealed shut creates a sense of anxiety and panic that might be a problem. So, works best in a carefully selected individual who has probably had their sleep or symptoms evaluated by a professional and using the right tape that can easily come off, or maybe even tape that when you really try to open your mouth, it just kind of pops open easily. So this is not something that should be binding your mouth closed. The next one, which might surprise some people that I included on the list, which is CPAP, continuous positive airway pressure. We all use it for sleep apnea. I have tons of patients who use it. There was a study back in the New England Journal 2016, the SAVE trial by McAvoy et al., that basically said CPAP improves symptoms reliably. I mean, people feel better on the CPAP. Trust me, if they didn't, they wouldn't use them. And there is definitely cardiovascular benefit in a lot of individuals. But as you start to drift down that spectrum from worst I've ever seen, 150 breathing problems per hour, as you start moving towards fewer and fewer breathing disturbances per hour, we consider sleep apnea to be more than five breathing problems per hour. It used to be 15, now it's five. So having somebody with six, seven breathing problems per hour, asymptomatic, the only reason they came to the clinic is because their partner says, "Hey, you snore, it's bothering me, you should get checked out." We check them out, and yeah, they got sleep apnea by the definition of it, but it's barely there. There is some idea and data that cardiovascular benefit might be inconsistent with those individuals and possibly lead to over treating very mild sleep apnea. Obviously, there's adherence to, outcomes that go along with it. And what we learned during COVID was that Philips Respironics CPAP that a lot of people were using, there was a foam degradation inside of the CPAP that that particulate exposure of that foam breakdown, which may have been de novo, it was happening by itself, may have been related to people using ozone to clean their CPAPs. It's sort of unclear that cancer risk went up. So they actually recalled a lot of those CPAPs. So listen, CPAP is a life-saving device for the majority of patients. But as with everything, we really want to evaluate who's right for these devices. And frankly, is it doing what you needed it and expected it to do? Meaning, you're exhausted, you're falling asleep at stoplights, somebody diagnoses you with mild sleep apnea, puts you on a CPAP. There's nothing wrong with that, but you're still falling asleep at stoplights. And nobody's doing anything about that because they're all patting themselves on the back for diagnosing your AHI of 7.2 sleep apnea. So there's a lot of things that get wrapped up in sleep apnea. For a lot of people, it's the end of the road when it comes to diagnostic sleep intervention. So make sure that the CPAP's working for you. The next one, which is kind of an interesting one that I thought of, which is turmeric. I've talked about golden milk long, long time ago in the podcast as something that might be helpful for people who, want something to eat, or I should say drink before you go to bed. There was a company that was making golden milk and some interesting milks that you could take, lavender milk, golden milk, and something else. I can't remember what the other one was. Before you go to bed. And I thought these were great products and they tasted delicious. It was a nice little beverage, either warm or cold to have when you went to bed that wouldn't keep you up and might actually tip the scales in terms of helping you fall asleep a little bit faster. So within turmeric, the active ingredient that we talk about is curcumin. So curcumin is often marketed as an anti-inflammatory sleep aid. Using it with a little bit of pepper, in black pepper, that pungent taste is pepperine. It dramatically increases its absorption in your body, but too much curcumin can result in hepatic toxicity. And I thought about this because I was watching, I think it was The Pit, and some random woman looked very healthy was coming in, was in liver failure, and nobody could figure out what's going on. And somebody said, you should ask her if she's, it was so great. They were like, maybe she's one of these health maxers. And somebody who kind of knew something about that went in there and they're like, hey, are you, sleep maxing? Are you doing this, doing that? And she said, yeah, I'm using a lot of turmeric to help with inflammation, et cetera, et cetera. And she was taking an unbelievable amount of it. And I literally I drink turmeric juice all the time. I started drinking when I lived in Charlottesville. I'd go to this place called the Juice Laundry, and they had this amazing drink called turmeric tonic. And it was turmeric in coconut water with some lime and ginger and maybe a little bit of maple. So I just completely copied their recipe. And I was literally using AI to help me analyze what was in this drink so I could make it myself. So I had a juicer. I would juice the turmeric root, blah, blah, blah. So I watched this episode of The Pit. I'm like, oh God, like I'm just kind of putting this together with your chat GPT's help. Am I hurting myself? And so, went to the computer, started looking things up. Like when you juice turmeric, how much of the curcumin are you actually getting? And trying to do those calculations. And I kind of figured out, looking it up, that for every 100 milliliters of turmeric juice you're probably getting somewhere between 10 to 50 milligrams of the curcumin. And so I take the 100 milliliters roughly, because I measured it out the next time I made it. 100 milligrams, I distributed over 4 or 5 bottles with 16 ounces of coconut water and all the other stuff in there. I said coconut milk. No, coconut water. And so you're getting about 10 milligrams, 12.5 milligrams per bottle. If you've ever gone to Starbucks, they have the little ginger shots now and the turmeric shots. Those 3 ounce bottles have about 12.5 milligrams of turmeric in them. So basically, they're saying, look, even a dose of 20 to 25 is probably is totally fine, and um, so juicing is you're probably going to struggle to get too much. So if you're within that dose of 12 and a half, 10, even 20, 30, you're perfectly fine. I was looking up the maximum doses. They were saying, look, you could have probably 3 or 4 bottles of this and still be well underneath your note. So do a little research, make sure you're not getting too much of this if that's something that you're using. But if you're buying golden milk that's already put together for you, you're probably getting the essence and the flavor of it, but you're probably nowhere near getting that. You probably have to be taking the turmeric capsules and a lot of them to really hurt yourself. Next one is modafinil, often the safe stimulant, we call it. It's a medication we often use for narcolepsy, shift work disorder, sleep apnea. Used to be marketed as Provigil, but the generic that everybody uses now, modafinil. There's also Nuvigil, which is armodafinil. It's the right-handed molecule of modafinil, so it's a little bit stronger, a bit more potent. Um, Risks for this, it can lower hormonal contraception levels. So we always tell people, hey, you're taking this medication and you're relying on hormonal contraception to not get pregnant, it could be lowering that and making your contraception less effective. The next one is there was a signal seen in post-marketing registries of major congenital malformations in babies to pregnant women who were taking the drug, 13 to 15%. So it was not insignificant. Now, there were other registries, I think, in the United States that never showed this. This, I believe, was a Canadian registry data. So it's something that we always warn our patients about. Hey, if you're going to get pregnant, come off this medication before you do. So the drug has the effect, the ability to get you pregnant because it makes your contraception not work, and then maybe cause some problems with your baby. I think low birth weight was in there as well too, if I'm recalling correctly. It can cause anxiety, and anxiety comes with it insomnia. So a lot of times you can paradoxically worsen insomnia with a stimulant. Any stimulants can do it, but modafinil could certainly do it as well too. So it's better than amphetamines, for sure, cleaner, but it doesn't mean that they're consequence free. And speaking of consequence free, let's talk about sleeping pills. You know, I hate them, don't like them, don't generally prescribe them, but they're out there and they do have their purpose. The Z drugs, Zolpidem, uh, is probably the most common. Ambien, we talk about what are the risks for that, particularly with women. Sleepwalking, bizarre, REM behavior, acting out dreams and sleepwalking and having sort of amnesia for the event. Dependence tolerance can certainly happen, falls, cognitive impairment in the elderly. They reduce perceived wakefulness more than they actual, improve sleep quality. They treat the experience of insomnia better than the pathophysiology of insomnia, meaning when people take it, they're like, oh, this drug really works. Again, how are you defining work? Well, when I take it, I become unconscious faster and I stay unconscious longer. Again, let's not equate that with better quality sleep or better functioning performance the following day. Melatonin is often a drug we think of as not really having a lethal dose. So there's something we call the LD50, and it's like how many, God, it basically relates to how much of a drug do you have to give in order to approach a lethal dose in 50% of people or something like that. I might be remembering that wrong. I don't deal in the LD50 a lot, but I remember reading a study one time that basically said melatonin really doesn't have much in the way of toxicity. There was recently a study or a paper that came out called "What Are the Melatonin Toxicities?" Now, what was the name of the? No, it was. I'm sorry, it was Melatonin's Paradox: From Therapeutic Benefit to Toxicity Warnings. This came out in 2025. And basically, they ran through what could possibly go wrong with melatonin in terms of dose dependent and long term toxicity concerns. There were some endocrinologic and metabolic effects that they thought about maybe linking higher doses to impaired glucose tolerance, possible association with type 2 diabetes via the MTNR1B signaling pathway, maybe potential effects on blood pressure regulation and heart rate variability, because we know melatonin does have some cardiovascular roles there. Daytime sleepiness, sedation, dizziness, headaches, we've always talked about, particularly with young people. Melatonin seems very, very popular in terms of a drug given to kids who struggle with their sleep, and so being careful about that. There are some immunological effects where it could stimulate the immune system, which could be very positive, but perhaps they could worsen autoimmune conditions. Drug interactions were important clinically with CNS depressants, anticoagulants, possible some bleeding risk there, antihypertensive, anti-diabetic medications, reproductive and developmental concerns, circadian biology disruption, which we talk about a lot. If you're constantly signaling your circadian pathway with a chemical rather than the sun going down, that can be a problem, etc. So just being very careful in elderly and children, I think makes the most sense. Weighted blankets, I thought was an interesting one because we've talked about these before with small children. They could pose a threat because these things are weighted. They're very heavy. Frail elderly individuals who struggle to move around easily could pin them into bed. Not ideal for people with COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So comfort is great. Restriction is not, to be very careful with the people who are using weighted blankets. I thought it'd be funny to put alcohol in the air because it's probably the most common sleep aid in this country. I tell people drink all the alcohol you want. Just never associate that alcohol with good quality sleep because that does not exist. Blue light blocking, helpful in theory, but I think it's really the amount of light in your environment that makes the most sense rather than the wave light. So they look cool. You look like Bono when you wear them, but I don't think it's the light itself that's the biggest problem. It's probably more about engagement. Napping. Well, napping's great. Sure, napping's awesome when it's done the right way at the right time for the right amount. I think longer naps can be very harmful, particularly in individuals who are struggling with their sleep schedule. I struggled to fall asleep last night, so I woke up and had to do some things. Then I came home, and because I didn't sleep that well last night, I took a 3 hour nap. Then I woke up and I tried to go to sleep that night at the right time, but I couldn't, or I did, but I woke up early, right? Because you slept 3 hours. So I think napping can be problematic in some people and an amazing way to deal with inadequate sleep. If you're traveling a lot, you would have gotten better sleep, but the travel's keeping you from doing it. Hey, napping can be your friend. And the last thing I'll mention are sleep trackers. I think sleep trackers are awesome. I'm wearing one right now. I put my watch on when I went out to Houston and actually wore it that night. I kind of ducked out from the gathering of all the sleep people a little early and signed some prescriptions in my room, went to bed, and I wore my sleep tracker kind of accidentally. And it's always kind of cool to see, well, what happens when you fly to Houston, you're one time zone off, and how do you sleep? I did not consume alcohol, even got a workout in that day and felt pretty good. For some people, we think about Kelly Barron and orthosomnia, where wearing this thing puts them under a certain pressure to sleep a certain way, to get a certain score, to keep a certain streak alive. We always want to use sleep trackers just to kind of help guide us and help us understand. I'm telling you, wow, I'm traveling a lot right now, but I'm making sure I'm getting my sleep. Maybe my tracker has something else to say about that. Well, you're telling everybody you're getting your 7 to 8 hours, but you're actually not. So we want to use that as sort of a sleep referee when we use it. So when measurement becomes the disorder, we need to move away from the measurement. So this was a fun topic. Really appreciate Pluto Pillow for being our sponsor, being such a friend to the podcast. They've sponsored episodes before, and we look forward to partnering with them in any way we can in the future because they're a great company. You should check them out. Again, winner of the 2026 Sleep Unplugged Pillow Fight is Pluto Pillow. So thanks a lot to those guys. So let's think about these sleep fixes as generally positive. The real danger in sleep medicine isn't bad ideas. It's partial truths and overexuberance. Almost every intervention we discussed today works in the right people the majority of the time, but we're not talking about the majority of the time. We're not talking about the right people. We're talking about those outliers that we want to help not be an outlier. So be careful with any advice that you're getting, even advice from this podcast. Check with your doctor, check with reliable sources, check with other sleep experts. I love a second opinion. Nothing would make me happier than for somebody to say, Chris, I was thinking about something that you recommended, and I talked to the sleep vigilante in Indianapolis and asked him about it. And he actually said this wouldn't be a good idea because of X, Y, and Z. Let me know. We want to give great evidence-based information on this podcast. Thanks again to Pluto. Good luck with your own sleep fixes. Read the fine print, listen to Bob Seger, and until next week, sleep well.